I'm gonna be refuting the claims of my opponent, and their claims were that taking the SAT doesn't help. There's no correlation between the GPA of freshman year college students and the SAT scores. There's no correlation between that, and that it is unfair and biased toward the male gender and richer people. And their third claim was that the SAT subject test would be a better thing to evaluate for college admissions. So the first claim that it doesn't measure the college GPA, there's actually a study done. There was a blog writer who felt skeptical about the statistics between the correlation, and he and some other professors, specifically from Christopher Berry of Wayne State University and Paul Sackett of University of Minnesota, they got together and they studied this, and they realized that there are two problems when you have to do the study of finding the correlation. The first is that the high schoolers, they all apply to different universities depending on their SAT scores and the school gradings and things like that. So the stronger students who have higher SAT scores and higher GPAs will apply to a higher tier of colleges versus an average student who will apply to a less ambitious tier, and there is some overlap. And the second major point is that once a student gets into college, they will apply for classes where they feel that they will do well in. So the more ambitious students will be taking more challenging classes versus the average student who would be taking a class that they feel confident that they'll have a good grade in. So these were the two things that could possibly change the data received. So what Christopher Berry and Paul Sackett of University of Minnesota, they pulled in 5.1 million grades from 1,607 students, and this was spread about 41 colleges. And they also got the SAT scores from College Board, as well as a list of schools that the students were asked to send College Board their SAT score. So these two people, Berry and Sackett, kind of knew which colleges these students applied to. And they isolated the overlaps, and they realized that, they isolated the overlaps where students had applied to the same colleges and had taken the same courses at the same time with the same instructor. And they isolated this, and it turned out that the SAT score was a far better predictor than what everyone else assumed. And it was actually SAT scores correlate with college GPA around 67%, and that is actually a pretty big percent comparison. So colleges can really see how the student will do in their college depending on their SAT score. My second point is that the SATs are unfair and biased towards rich people. So people who have more money will obviously, they will get tutoring, and they will go to academies, and they will have more help, and this will raise their points. But just because they receive tutoring for the SATs doesn't mean they don't receive tutoring for their normal school classes as well. These rich people will also have the access to get tutoring for their lower classes, which also makes their GPA higher as well. So by abolishing the SAT, it doesn't help the poor people get into college, because their GPA will still be lower compared to the GPA of a richer student, because they will receive tutoring. Also, and my final point, my final refutation about the SAT subject being a better analyzer of how a student will do in college. Actually, the SATs are more beneficial than the subject test. Locke Edwin, he is a senior editor for the Anne Ryan Institute, and he says that although Dr. Atkinson, who is a person who supports subject tests and abolition of SATs, prefers the use of achievement tests that show of particular content or areas such as history or biology, achievement tests are not as useful for admission decisions as the SAT, because they are heavily influenced by how much coursework the student has had in a given subject, whereas the SAT measures aptitude for learning across many different types of subject matter. The SAT subject test focuses on one subject, either chemistry or biology, and the student can focus on that one subject for as long as they want, maybe 2 months, 3 months, preparing for the SAT test. But this just shows how well they can study for one test. The SAT actually goes overall writing, reading, and math, and they have to study all of these things. Actually, the SAT subject tests were recently not required for college admissions because the SAT subject test add little to the prediction of how well a student will do at a UC once the GPA is calculated with their SAT scores, and this is from the UC application website. Also, the reason that these SAT subject tests were no longer required, and this is also according to the UC Regents adopts changes to the freshman eligibility, is because the SAT subject test is an eliminating barrier that has made otherwise high-performing students invisible to the UC system specifically. So the subject tests prevented other students who are eligible for UCs from actually applying and getting into the UC system because it didn't work out as they thought it would work out. And as I said before, the SAT subject test is a student's mastery on a specific academic matter, and that's what the UCs deemed the subject test as a definition, while the SATs overall is just, it goes through everything. So students will have to learn everything, and once a student enters college, they're not going to be focusing on just one subject. They'll be focusing on courses, general education courses that vary throughout their college education. So because of that, the SATs should be kept and should not be abolished.